The cathedral bells tolled, deep and resonant, their sound curling through the ancient stone like a warning only she could hear. Sophia Montenegro stepped into the aisle, her white gown flowing in a perfect river of silk but to her. It felt like a chain dragging behind her, each step heavier than the last. At 22, she should have been walking toward a future she chose. Instead, she was walking toward a stranger, Gabriel Romano, a name whispered with reverence in boardrooms, a tech billionaire whose empire stretched across 3 continents. He was a man of impossible power and untouchable influence, yet utterly unknown to her. Her fingers tightened around the bouquet of white roses, their beauty flawless, their thorns hidden just like this marriage. The guests weren't here for love, they were here for spectacle. Rows of polished faces, most of them business associates, society figures, or opportunists, studied her with a curiosity as cold as the marble under her feet in the front row. Her Aunt Carmen watched with a smile sharp enough to cut. It was the smile of someone who had already counted her winnings. Carmen had orchestrated this union as one might close a business deal, favoring her orphaned niece in exchange for wealth and influence, elevating the Montenegro name into elite society at the cost of Sophia's freedom. Gabriel stood waiting at the altar, posture regal, movements deliberate. At 35 he carried the air of a man used to control, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, his storm grey eyes hiding truths as solid and unyielding as carved stone. His suit was flawless, his expression unreadable. He was not a groom in love. He was a man sealing an arrangement. When their eyes met, Sophia saw intelligence, dominance, and a wall so high it could shut out the world. Gabriel saw beauty golden brown, hair, eyes the color of honey, but it was laced with something fragile, something guarded. The priest's voice blurred into the background. Gabriel's vows were delivered with the precision of a contract signing. Sophia's were barely more than a whisper. When his hand slid the ring onto hers, the touch was gentle yet detached, as if she was something valuable but impersonal. The kiss that followed was little more than a polite formality, a handshake, for the benefit of the onlookers. Turning toward the crowd, Sophia felt like an actress reciting lines for a play she had never wanted to star in. The car ride to the Romano estate was silent, the air between them taut with unspoken truths. Outside, the Spanish countryside blurred past in golds and greens, but Sophia barely noticed. The closer they drew to her new home, the tighter her chest became. The Romano estate rose from the hills outside Madrid like a fortress steel. Glass and stone fused into a structure that was both breathtaking and intimidating. The modern lines reflected the fading light, cold and perfect. As the car passed through the towering electronic gates, she felt the shifter door closing on the life she once knew. On the front steps, Elena Vasquez, the head housekeeper, waited. Her stance was poised, her expression unreadable, her gaze sharp enough to weigh and measure Sophia in a single glance. This was not just a welcome, it was an assessment, and in that moment, Sophia understood this was not just a marriage, it was an initiation into a world where every move would be watched, every word calculated, and where survival would require far more than a beautiful smile. She was a woman in her 50s, her kind eyes framed by fine lines that spoke of a life lived in both joy and hardship. Her greying hair was swept back neatly into a bun, and unlike Gabriel's guarded demeanor, her smile reached all the way to her eyes. "Welcome home, Signora Romano," Elena said warmly, though Sophia felt the title sit strangely on her shoulders. like a dress tailored for someone else. Gabriel stepped out of the car, adjusting his tie with a precise motion. "Alina will show you to your rooms," he said, without glancing in her direction. "I have calls to make." The words felt colder than the autumn breeze that swept across the estate. Inside, the house was a cathedral of Welf marble floors so polished they reflected the crystal chandeliers above. Priceless paintings gazing down from the walls like silent sentinels. Everything was perfect, immaculate, untouched, and yet it felt lifeless. Like a museum you were afraid to breathe in, lest you disturb its stillness. Alina guided her down corridors lined with towering windows that revealed sweeping views of the hills bathed in the last light of day. "The master bedroom is here," Alina said, opening a door to reveal an expansive suite with a private sitting area and a terrace overlooking the valley. Sophia hesitated before asking the question that burned in her mind. "And where does Gabriel sleep?" A shadow of understanding crossed Alina's face. "Senna Romano has his own suite at the far end of the hall. He thought you might appreciate your privacy while you adjust." The words brought an odd mix of relief and unease. Most new husbands would want to share a room, yet Gabriel seemed intent on keeping a deliberate distance. That evening, dressed in a modest blue dress, Sophia entered the dining room. The table was set for two, but the scene felt far from intimate. Gabriel sat at one end, papers spread before him, his attention fixed anywhere but on her. He acknowledged her arrival with a brief glance, but no greeting. The only sounds during dinner were the muted clinks of silverware against porcelain. "The house is beautiful," Sophia ventured, her voice a careful thread in the silence. "Thank you," he replied, eyes still scanning the document in his hands. "Have you lived here long?" His gaze flicked up for a moment, something unreadable flashing in his grey eyes. 5 years, he said curtly. Before returning to his work, it was the kind of dismissal you couldn't argue with, gentle enough to be polite, but final enough to leave you feeling small. When the meal ended, Sophia's sense of isolation pressed in heavier than the stone walls around her. Sleep would not come. The vast bedroom felt foreign, the silence oppressive. She wandered the dimly lit corridors, her bare feet whispering over the marble. The distant murmur of Gabriel's voice drifted from his office rapid, clipped Spanish, the cadence of high-stakes business. Her steps slowed when she reached the far end of an unfamiliar hallway. A door stood slightly ajar, a thin ribbon of moonlight spilling through the gap. Something about it pulled at her. Curiosity edged out caution, and she pushed the door open. Her breath caught. The room before her was unlike any other in the house. It wasn't pristine or calculated, was alive. It was a music room, but not like the rest of the estate's cold perfection. This one felt lived in, almost sacred. At its heart stood a grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the silver glow of moonlight through the tall windows. Sheet music lay scattered across the bench in quiet disarray, as though the last player had left mid-song and never returned. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece, each one a frozen fragment of another time. But it was the large portrait above the fireplace that made Sophia's breath catch in her throat. The woman in the painting was breathtaking, dark hair flowing around a face lit with laughter, eyes that seemed alive even in stillness. She wore a simple white dress and held a single red rose, as if she were offering it to whoever looked upon her. At the bottom of the ornate frame, a small plaque read, "Isabella Romano, beloved wife." 1985 to 2018, the name echoed in Sophia's mind like a whispered secret. She stepped forward cautiously, as though afraid her presence might disturb the memory hanging in the air. Her eyes drifted to the piano. The sheet music was filled with classical pieces, Chopin, Debussy works that demanded both skill and soul. A light coat of dust clung to the ivory keys, proof they had not been touched. In years, Sophia's fingertips hovered above the keyboard, hesitating. Then, almost unconsciously, she pressed a single key. The note rang out, pure and haunting, its sound stretching into the corners of the empty room like a lonely sigh. Her hands moved without thought, playing a simple melody her mother had taught her long ago, before the accident, before the loss. Music had been the language of her childhood, a safe place where words weren't needed. The melody floated into the stillness, carrying both longing and hope. And for the first time since she had arrived at the Romano estate, Sophia felt herself. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. When she finally looked up, Gabriel was standing in the doorway. His face was pale, his grey eyes locked on her with an expression she couldn't read, shock, maybe even something deeper. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, pulling her hands back as if the keys had burned her. "I couldn't sleep, and I found this room. I didn't mean to intrude." Gabriel stepped inside slowly, his gaze moving from Sophia to Isabella's portrait, then back again. "She played," he said quietly, his voice rough. Every morning it was how she began her day. The pain in his tone was raw, unhidden. Sophia felt a sudden, sharp understanding. This wasn't simply his first wife. This had been the love of his life, and she was just a shadow standing where that light had once been. She was beautiful, Sophia said softly, eyes drifting back to the portrait. Gabriel's jaw tightened. She was everything. The words slipped from him before he seemed to realize it, and for a moment silence filled the room, heavy, fragile, loaded with truths neither of them knew how to voice. "You play well," he said at last, his voice lower now. "Where did you learn?" "My mother taught me, before she died. Music was everything to us." Gabriel studied her for a long moment, and for the first time since their wedding, there was no ice in his gaze, only something quieter, harder to name. "I should let you rest," he said finally. "Tomorrow will be a long day." They walked side by side down the dim hallway toward their separate rooms. The silence between them felt different now, not warm, but not hostile either. At her door, Gabriel stopped. "Sophia," he said, and the way her name rolled from his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though he might say more, but instead, he simply inclined his head and turned away, leaving her standing in the doorway, pulse unsteady, wondering what exactly had shifted in that music room. "Yes, this arrangement," Gabriel said, gesturing vaguely between them. "It's not what either of us would have chosen, but we can try to make it bearable for both of us." It wasn't a declaration of love, not even close, but it was the first time he'd acknowledged she was more than a contract, more than a name on paper. "I'd like that," Sophia replied softly. Gabriel gave a brief nod and turned toward the door. But just as he reached it, he paused. Without looking back, he said, "The music room, you can use it whenever you want. Music should be shared, not locked away." When the door clicked shut, Sophia leaned back against it, her breath trembling in her chest. She was married to a man who still loved a ghost, living in a house filled with memories that would never belong to her. And yet, for the first time, since the vows had been spoken, a small ember of hope warmed her through her bedroom window. The lights of Madrid shimmered in the distance, like a city holding secrets she had yet to uncover. Tomorrow would bring its own trials and more truths about the complex, guarded man she now called husband. But tonight, she clung to that fragile, sparker, quiet reminder that she would not be just another ornament in Gabriel Romano's carefully controlled world. The timid girl who had walked down the aisle that morning was already fading, replaced by someone stronger, someone who would fight for her place in this unfamiliar life. When she awoke the next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows, warm against her skin. A faint sound drifted through the house, classical music, delicate yet commanding. For a blissful second, she forgot where she was. Then it all came back. The wedding, the estate, the stranger she had married. She dressed in a simple yellow sundress, the kind that reminded her of summers before her life had been bargained away, and followed the music through the echoing halls. It led her to the breakfast room, a space framed by wide windows that bathed everything in golden light. Gabriel sat at a sleek glass table, the morning paper open in his hands, while a piano concerto played softly from hidden speakers. He looked up as she entered. His eyes lingered on her just for a second longer than politeness demanded before. He folded the paper neatly. "Morning," he said, his voice low but not unkind. "I hope you slept well." "Better than expected," she admitted. Sliding into the chair across from him, almost immediately, Alina appeared, setting down a tray of fresh coffee and warm pastries. The older woman's presence had already begun to feel like a lifeline. In this cold, sprawling house, Gabriel took a slow sip from his cup, studying her over the rim. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about your family and music." Sophia blinked, surprised by the genuine curiosity in his tone. "What about it? Tell me more," he said simply. She hesitated, then began. "My parents were musicians. Papa played violin in the Madrid Symphony, and Mama taught piano at the conservatory. They met during a performance of Romeo and Juliet. For the first time, she caught at a fleeting change in his expression. The faintest curve of a smile ghosted across Gabriel's lips. A romantic beginning. He saddened for a moment. Sophia almost believed it. They used to say music brought them together, she murmured, and kept them together through everything. Her voice softened, almost breaking. When they died in the car accident, the music died with them. At least, that's how it felt. Gabriel set his cup down, the faint clink against porcelain marking the shift in the air. His expression hardened, but not out of coldness, out of understanding. "And your Aunt Carmen took you in," he said. "She took me in, yes," Sophia replied, her tone edged with bitterness, "but not out of love. Carmen saw an opportunity, an orphaned niece with a small inheritance and no one to protect her. I was less family and more a transaction." Gabriel didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if filing the truth away. After breakfast, to her surprise, he invited her to visit his office. Romano Technologies dominated the Madrid skyline, its glass tower glittering like a blade in the morning light. Inside, the elevator rose swiftly, the city falling away beneath them. "We develop security software for governments and corporations worldwide," Gabriel explained. "It started as a way to protect people from digital threats, but it's grown into something much larger." His top-floor office radiated power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a living painting, and a dozen screens streamed real-time market data. It was impressive, daunting, even, but beneath the sleek surfaces and technological might, Sophia sensed something else. loneliness. You built all this after Isabella died, she said quietly. Gabriel's fingers froze over the keyboard. His gaze, for a fraction of a second, turned raw. Work became my escape. When you lose someone you love completely, you need something to fill the emptiness, or it will destroy you. It was the most honest thing he had said since their wedding, and in that moment Sophia felt it a fragile bridge forming between them, but the connection shattered with a single knock. Gabriel's assistant appeared, flustered. "Sir, you have an unexpected visitor." Before either of them could respond, the door swung open and a woman stepped inside as if she owned the air they breathed. She was stunning platinum blonde hair, eyes like shards of blue ice, and the confident sway of someone who had never been told no. "Gabriel, darling," she purred in accented English. "I heard the most fascinating news about your recent wedding." In an instant, Gabriel's warmth vanished. He straightened, shoulders squared, his tone suddenly cool. "Natasha, this is unexpected, isn't it?" "I would have thought," she said with a sly smile, "you'd call me yourself with such important news." Her gaze slid to Sophia, slow and deliberate, and her smile sharpened into something predatory. "So you must be the little wife I've heard so much about." Sophia's cheeks heated under the weight of Natasha's scrutiny, but she didn't look away. She extended her hand, keeping her voice steady. "Sophia Romano." "Natasha Volovi," the woman replied, barely letting her fingers brush Sophia's. Her eyes gleamed. "Gabriel and I are old friends, very old, very close friends." The air between them thickened, the tension almost suffocating. Gabriel stepped closer to Sophia, a protective edge in his movement, his jaw tightening like he was holding back words far sharper than any he'd yet spoken. Natasha's words slithered through the room like poison. Double quotes, "Natasha, what do you want?" Gabriel's tone was clipped, controlled, her lips curved in a mock-innocent smile. "Can't I congratulate an old lover on his marriage?" she purred. "Though I must say, the timing is curious. So soon after our last evening together in Paris." The words landed in Sophia's chest like a blade. Paris, the name alone, was enough to pull the ground out from under her. She'd begun foolishly to think that the icy wall between her and Gabriel was beginning to thaw, that maybe there was something genuine forming. But Paris, that meant he had been with this woman recently. Maybe while their marriage was already being arranged. The thought made her stomach knot. "That's enough," Gabriel said sharply. His voice didn't rise, but it cut through the tension like a whip. "Sophia, would you mind waiting in the reception area? I need to speak with Natasha privately." It felt like a dismissal. It was a dismissal, but Sophia forced her chin high, schooling her features into calm, and walked out with quiet dignity from the sleek armchair in the glass-walled reception area. She could see them, two silhouettes, intense, animated conversation. Gabriel's posture was rigid. Natasha leaned in close, her movements deliberate. She couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. Every flick of Natasha's smile, every measured tilt of her head told Sophia exactly who held the power. In that moment, 20 long minutes later, Natasha emerged. Her expression was pure satisfaction, like a cat stepping away from an empty bowl of cream. She paused beside Sophia, lowering her voice. "A word of advice, dear," she said with syrupy venom. "Gabriel is a complicated man with expensive tastes. Don't mistake a business arrangement for something more. You'll only hurt yourself." And with that, she walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. The car ride home was steeped in silence. Sophia stared out the window, the city passing in fractured reflections on the glass, while Gabriel spoke into his phone in low, rapid tones about contracts and deadlines. Neither of them touched the subject that sat like a live wire between them. It wasn't until they were back at the estate, in his study with the door shut, that Gabriel finally spoke. What Natasha implied about Paris, his words trailed off as he rubbed a hand over his face, his composure fraying. I need you to understand the context. You don't owe me an explanation, Sophia said quietly. This isn't a real marriage, is it? Gabriel's gaze locked on hers, and for a moment, she saw something crack in those grey eyes. It's starting to feel real to me. The words landed between them like an unspoken challenge, a dangerous invitation to step closer to something neither of them fully trusted. Sophia's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. Tell me about Paris. He poured himself a glass of scotch, offering one to her. She declined. 6 months ago, he began, I was still lost. Isabella had been gone for 2 years, but I wasn't moving forward. Natasha and I had a brief history, long before I met Isabella. She reached out, said she was worried about me. I agreed to meet her. We went to Paris for a weekend. Sophia's eyes stayed on him, searching for truth. But nothing happened, he said firmly. Not what she implied. I realized quickly that I was trying to fill a void with someone who only reminded me of what I wasn't ready to face. What she saw in his face wasn't evasion, it was vulnerability, threaded with regret. The marriage arrangement came up a month later. Gabriel continued. My board of directors had been pressing me to settle down. They said it would be good for the company's image. And when your aunt approached my lawyers, it seemed like a practical solution. The shadows in Gabriel's studies seemed to stretch as his voice dropped lower, each word weighted. But there's something else, he said, his gaze locking on hers. Something I didn't tell you yesterday. This marriage wasn't just about image, it was about survival. There's a hostile takeover attempt brewing, led by my former business partner, Roberto Santos. Sophia leaned forward, her pulse quickening. Despite herself, what kind of takeover? Gabriel's jaw tightened. Roberto believes that if he can make me look unstable, unreliable, or distracted, he can sway enough shareholders to sell to his consortium. A marriage to a respectable young woman was supposed to counter that narrative, show the world I'm grounded. Sophia's eyes narrowed. So, I'm not just a wife, she said slowly. I'm a prop in your corporate war, Gabriel said. His glass down with deliberate precision and met her gaze without flinching. That's how it started, yes, but that's not how I feel now. Before Sophia could respond, a sharp knock rattled the study door. Alina stepped in, her usually calm expression unsettled. Señor Gabriel. There's a problem. Roberto Santos is at the front gate, and he's brought men with him. From the window, they saw the scene unfold. A row of expensive cars glinting in the late sun, security lights flashing against polished paint. At the center stood Roberto, silver-haired, his tailored suit immaculate, his posture steeped in entitlement. The smirk on his face reminded Sophia of her Aunt Carmen's brand of arrogance, wealth, weaponized like a blade. He can't enter without permission, Gabriel muttered, already reaching for his phone to alert security. Wait, Sophia said, surprising even herself with the firmness in her tone. Gabriel turned to her sharply. Absolutely not. You have no idea how dangerous he. I understand perfectly, she cut in. Her voice was calm, her spine straight. I've dealt with men like him my whole life. Men who think intimidation and manipulation are the same thing as power. Before Gabriel could stop her, she crossed the room, heels striking the polished wood like a countdown. She pressed the intercom button by the front door. "Senna Santos," she said evenly. "This is Sophia Romano. My husband is in the middle of an important meeting, but I'm happy to speak with you in his place." There was a beat of silence before Roberto's voice slid through the speaker's moods, practiced and steeped in condescension. "Signora Romano, how delightful. I was hoping to meet the young woman who so quickly captured Gabriel's heart." Sophia's lips curved, but her tone stayed cool. "What can I do for you, Senna Santos? I only wanted to welcome you to the family business," Roberto said. The words dipped in implication. "And perhaps offer some friendly advice about your husband's financial situation." Behind her, Gabriel took a step toward the door, but Sophia held up one steady hand. "Never." Taking her eyes from the camera feed, "I appreciate your concern," she replied, "but I'm more than satisfied with my husband's business practices. In fact, I've been reviewing his company's performance, and the growth has been remarkable." It was a bluff. She hadn't reviewed a single document, but the silence that followed told her she'd landed a hit. "Of course," Roberto said at last, his voice losing some of its syrup. "You're newlyweds. You probably haven't had time to discuss the more challenging aspects of the business." There was a pause, then a smile in his tone. "Perhaps we could meet for lunch soon, just the two of us." The room seemed to hold its breath as moonlight spilled across the polished piano, bathing their hands in silver. Sophia could feel the weight of Gabriel's words, not just a promise, but a quiet vow that slipped beneath her defenses and anchored itself deep. His touch was steady, warm against her fingers, and she didn't pull away. For a man who had spent years locked behind walls of control, his openness in this moment was disarming. "You mean that?" she asked softly, searching his face for any trace of hesitation. "I do," he replied without pause. "No matter what storms come, I'll face them before they ever reach you." Sophia's pulse drummed in her ears. She had walked into this house expecting nothing but cold formality and calculated arrangements. Yet here she was, sitting inches from a man whose guarded heart seemed to be cracking open just enough to let her see inside. Outside, the hills surrounding the Romano estate were cloaked in stillness. Somewhere far off, a night bird called, its lonely note drifting through the open balcony doors. The air smelled faintly of jasmine. Sophia glanced at the portrait of Isabella above the mantel. Instead of jealousy, she felt an odd sense of kinship as though the woman in the painting, smiling gently with her rose, would understand that this connection was not about replacing her, but about mending something broken. "Then I'll hold you too," that she murmured. Gabriel's lips curved, almost imperceptibly. "Good. I'd expect nothing less from you." They didn't speak again for a long while. The music room was filled only with the faint hum of the night and the lingering warmth of the duet they'd played together. It was imperfect, yes, but so was life. And maybe that was where the beauty lived. Sophia realized something. Then she wasn't just surviving this marriage anymore. She was beginning to choose it. Detective Martinez leaned forward, his voice low, as though the walls themselves might be listening. "From the moment you arrived here, Signora, you didn't behave the way Roberto expected. He thought you would resent Gabriel, keep your distance, maybe even undermine him. But instead, he glanced at Gabriel. You protected him, publicly consistently, that forced Roberto to change tactics. Sophia's pulse hammered in her ears. What do you mean, change tactics? The detective opened the folder, revealing grainy photographs and sheets of printed emails. 3 weeks ago, he stopped trying to use you as a pawn and started trying to remove you entirely. Gabriel's expression hardened instantly, the warmth she had seen in him lately vanishing behind the sharp steel of a man on alert. Remove her? How? Martinez met his eyes squarely. There's evidence suggesting he's been paying private investigators not to watch you, Gabriel, but to follow your wife. Your movements, your routines, even your evening walks in the garden. Sophia felt a chill creep up her spine. She thought back to moments in the past, days an unfamiliar car parked near the edge of the property, a flicker of movement in the shadows near the gate. At the time, she had dismissed them. Now they took on a much darker meaning. Gabriel stepped closer to her, one hand resting protectively on her arm. Why am I only hearing about this now? We only confirmed it yesterday, Martinez replied. And there's something else. We intercepted a message that strongly suggests Roberto has a contact inside Romano Technologies. Someone feeding him information from the inside. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Do you know who? Not yet, Martinez admitted. But whoever it is, they have access to sensitive data and your travel schedules. Sophia's stomach dropped. So he knows where we'll be, and when. Silence fell, broken only by the rhythmic patter of rain against the tall windows. Gabriel's grip on her arm tightened, slightly not in control, but in a silent promise. I won't let him touch you. But Sophia wasn't the same frightened bride who had walked into this estate weeks ago. Her fear was real, but beneath it burned something stronger, anger. Then we find him, she said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. The traitor. We find him before Roberto makes his next move. Gabriel studied her for a long moment, and then, with a small nod, he said, we do it together. Natasha's voice wavered. It wasn't the look of a man trapped in a cold arrangement. It was the look of someone who was finding hope again. I couldn't go through with it after that. But Roberto, he's relentless. If you go to that gala tonight, unprepared, he'll have the headlines ready before you've even left the building. Sophia's pulse quickened. The thought of being ambushed, their private lives turned into a public scandal, made her stomach churn. She glanced at Gabriel, whose expression was carved from stone. Detective Martinez's voice cut through the tension. Do you have proof of his plan? Emails, messages, anything? Natasha reached into her clutch and pulled out a slim flash drive, sliding it across Gabriel's desk. Everything is on their messages. From Roberto, the list of journalists he's invited, even the hotel suite he booked for the affair scene. I don't care what happens to me after this. I don't want to be part of it anymore. Gabriel took the flash drive without breaking eye contact with her. His voice was low, controlled but dangerous. If you're lying, Natasha. I'm not, she said firmly, though her eyes glistened with something dangerously close to fear. Sophia leaned back slightly, her mind already racing ahead. If we know what he's planning, maybe we can turn it on him. Gabriel's gaze shifted to her, that familiar flicker of admiration sparking in his grey eyes. You mean, walk into his trap on purpose? She nodded slowly. But on our terms. If Roberto wants a spectacle, we'll give him one. Only this time, it won't be us who ends up ruined. Martinez allowed himself the faintest of smiles. I can have plainclothes officers at the gala ready to move the second Roberto makes his play. but we'll need you both to sell the act until the very last moment." Gabriel exhaled, the decision already forming in his mind. "Then tonight," he said, his hand finding Sophia's, "we end this." Roberto raised his glass toward them in mock salute, his smile sharp enough to cut. Beside him, a pair of discreet photographers lingered near the buffet table, pretending to be guests. Gabriel's jaw tightened, but Sophia's grip on his arm kept him anchored. They worked the room like seasoned diplomats shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries until the moment came. Sophia excused herself, gliding toward the ladies' room. With a graceful turn of her head that let her catch Roberto's subtle nod to Natasha. Right on cue, Natasha intercepted Gabriel near the champagne fountain, her movements exaggerated just enough for the cameras. She leaned in, brushing imaginary lint from his lapel, her red-painted lips dangerously close to his ear. One of Roberto's photographers snapped a flurry of shots. Another repositioned himself for a better angle. Then, just as planned, Natasha accidentally tipped her glass, sending a streak of red wine blooming across Gabriel's pristine white shirt. Gasps rippled from the onlookers. Roberto, watching from across the room, allowed himself a slow, victorious smile. That's when Sophia returned. But instead of looking shocked or hurt, she walked straight to Gabriel, her head high, her expression unreadable. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. She reached for him and kissed him. Not a polite peck, not the staged kiss of their wedding day, but a deep, deliberate kiss that left no doubt where her loyalty and his heart truly lay. Cameras erupted in a frenzy. Natasha stepped back, visibly rattled as Sophia slipped her arm through Gabriel's and turned to face Roberto across the ballroom. "Smile for the cameras, Mr. Santos," she murmured under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear as she and Gabriel walked past. "You just captured the front page. Story of your own defeat." What Roberto didn't know, what the flashing bulbs and murmuring guests couldn't see, was that every word of his conspiracy had already been recorded. Natasha had met with him earlier that afternoon, wearing a wire, coaxing him into boasting about the scandal he had orchestrated. Detective Martinez was already in the hotel's private security room, listening in real time and ready to make his move by the time the applause for the charity auction began. Roberto Santos would be in handcuffs, and the only headline hitting. Tomorrow's papers would be about Gabriel and Sophia Romano's unshakable partnership. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like a man sharing a dangerous secret. "You deserve better than him," Roberto murmured. "Better than to be a pawn in his little empire. I can help you if you help me." Sophia tilted her head, feigning uncertainty. "Help you? How?" His lips curled into a smug smile. "Simple. You feed me information, confidential business details, anything that could shake investor confidence. In return, I'll make sure you're generously compensated. And when the dust settles, Gabriel will be ruined and you'll be free, with enough money to do whatever you wish." "That's a bold offer, Señor Santos," Sophia said, keeping her tone just on the edge of temptation. "But why me? Why go to all this trouble?" Roberto chuckled, glancing over her shoulder as if savoring his own genius. "Because you're already inside his world. You're the perfect Trojan horse. I paid your dear Aunt Carmen handsomely to put you there, and I must say you've done your part beautifully without even knowing it." Sophia felt a cold flash of satisfaction. He had just said exactly what Detective Martinez needed. She let her expression crumble into mock despair. "So, all this time, it was you pulling the strings?" "Of course," Roberto said, almost gloating. And after tonight's little photo scandal hits the morning papers, Gabriel will be finished. You'll walk away with your inheritance doubled, and I'll take control of Romano Technologies once and for all. That was the cue. Detective Martinez stepped from the shadows, 2 uniformed officers flanking him. Roberto Santos, his voice rang out, cutting through the muted noise of the gala. You are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and corporate espionage. The blood drained from Roberto's face as the officers closed in. What is this? He barked, looking wildly from Sophia to the detective. You think you can. We don't think, Martinez said coolly. We have it all on tape. Every word you just said. As handcuffs clicked around Roberto's wrists, the nearest photographers by the commotion swarmed to capture the moment. Flashes exploded, catching the image of Madrid's most arrogant businessman being led out in disgrace. His once perfect tuxedo rumpled and his expression twisted in rage. Sophia didn't move until Roberto was gone. Then she turned toward the ballroom. Gabriel was there, standing tall among the stunned guests, his grey eyes fixed solely on her. When she walked to him, he didn't hesitate, pulling her into an embrace that left no doubt in anyone's mind where his loyalty lay. You were extraordinary, he murmured against her hair. So were you, she replied, feeling the electricity. Of victory and something deeper that words couldn't quite touch. The gala resumed. But the night had already delivered its headline. Gabriel and Sophia Romano united in love and victory. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, attempted bribery, and violation of privacy laws. The words landed like a gavel in a courtroom, final and undeniable. Roberto froze, his silver-haired arrogance faltering as cold steel handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. His eyes, dark with fury, locked on Sophia. You little witch, he spat, his voice low and venomous. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sophia met his glare without flinching, her voice calm but edged with victory. I've protected my husband, our company, and my life from a creditor, and I've made sure you'll never destroy another family the way you tried to destroy mine. Detective Martinez gave a brief nod, signaling his officers to escort Roberto out. The flash of cameras from curious gala guests lit the hallway as the disgraced businessman was led away, his threats fading into the hum of the party beyond. Sophia exhaled slowly, her hands still steady, her heart thundering with a mixture of adrenaline and relief. Somewhere across the ballroom, she caught Gabriel's eyes' expression, a mixture of awe, pride, and something deeper. Something that felt dangerously close to love. Sophia's breath caught, her heart pounding as if trying to memorize every word he'd just spoken. She searched his face, half afraid this was some fleeting emotion brought on by adrenaline, but there was no mistaking the sincerity in his eyes. I love you too, she whispered, her voice trembling but sure. Not because you rescued me from Carmen, not because you gave me a new life, but because you've shown me that love can grow even in the most impossible places. Gabriel's arms closed around her, pulling her into a kiss that was deep and unhurried, the kind that erases every shadow of doubt. The city lights shimmered below them, Madrid's hum fading into nothing but the sound of their breaths and the pounding of their hearts. When they finally broke apart, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. No more secrets, he murmured. No more ghosts between us. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Sophia smiled through her tears, feeling lighter than she had in years. Together, she echoed, and as the rain-washed night wrapped around them, the girl who had once been a pawn in someone else's game stood hand in hand with the man who had become her greatest ally and, against all odds, her one true love. This closing is already heartfelt, but I can rephrase it with deeper suspense, richer emotions, and a more cinematic tone, still keeping it completely safe for YouTube monetization and suitable for all audiences. Here's your polished, emotional finale. Gabriel, I love you too, Sophia whispered, her voice trembling with joy. I think I started falling in love with you that first night in the music room, when you looked so lost and lonely, and every day since, I've fallen deeper. Their kiss beneath the stars was nothing like the formal one at their wedding. This was passionate and unrestrained, a promise forged in trust and sealed in love. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them side by side. Are you ready? Gabriel asked, straightening his tie. Sophia, in a simple yet elegant white dress, 6 months later, the music room that had once been a shrine to the past now breathed with new life. The walls bore photographs not only of Isabella's memory, but of Gabriel and Sophia's shared moments. Her at the piano, him laughing as she tried to teach him flamenco, the two of them side by side at charity galas and business triumphs. Isabella's portrait still hung above the fireplace, but it no longer felt like a monument to grief. Instead, it seemed to bless the love that had risen from loss. SS smiled. I've been ready for months. This time, they weren't marrying for convenience or corporate image. This time, it was love. The music room shimmered under fairy lights and white roses arranged by Elena. Detective Martinez stood proudly as Gabriel's best man. Even Natasha was there, redeemed in their eyes for the courage she had shown in helping bring down Roberto. Empire. Father Miguel, the priest who had once blessed Gabriel's first marriage, spoke gently but firmly. Marriage is not built on contracts or arrangements. It is the daily choice to love, to trust, and to protect each other. Today, Gabriel and Sophia, you choose one another not because you must, but because your hearts have found their home. Their vows were clear and steady. I promise to love you not only in the joy but in the trials, Sophia said. To build with you, to fight for us, to fill our home with music, laughter, and hope. Gabriel's gaze never wavered. I promise to protect you, but never to cage you. To honor your strength, to trust your heart, and to love you fiercely for all the days we're given. As friends and family celebrated, the piano filled the room again, not with solitary notes of longing, but with harmonies played by young musicians from the scholarship fund they had created with money seized from Roberto. Laughter echoed, children played, and the air felt alive. Are you happy? Gabriel asked softly, watching Sophia's smile. Happier than I ever believed possible, she replied. I thought love was something that happened to other people. Now I know it's something you create every single day. Gabriel pulled her close. I once thought losing Isabella was the end of my story, but it was just the end of one chapter. You helped me write a new one. As the night faded, they stayed at the piano, Sophia playing, Gabriel's voice blending with hers. The frightened orphan girl who had once walked into a marriage of necessity was gone. In her place stood a woman of strength, grace, and unshakable love. The widower who had buried his heart in the past had learned that love does not replace, it expands. Their story had begun in shadows and doubt, yet it had grown into something luminous and unbreakable. Proof that even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most extraordinary endings, and in the Romano household, the music would never stop.